Hi, Zoomies. I don't know about you, but I was rocking to Whitney, but I didn't want to mess everything up and start singing. But happy International Women's Day. Today is a global day celebrating the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women. This day is also a call to action to break the bias. But let's face it, tech still has an issue with gender diversity. The tech sector, sadly, lags behind the rest of the job market when it comes to hiring women. 48% of women in STEM jobs report discrimination in the recruitment and hiring process. Black and Hispanic women who majored in computer science or engineering are less likely to be hired into a tech role than their white counterparts. And 39% of women view gender bias as a primary reason for not being offered a promotion. So now let's talk about women of color. Women of color hold only 1% of CEO positions, and just 4% of technology professionals are women of color. 14% of the tech workforce today are white women, 10% Asian, 2% Black, and 1.7% is Latinx. And when it comes to board members, 29% of women, with only 6% being women of color. Finally, working in tech as a woman of color, it's very likely that you will be the only one or one of a few on the team. And I know for me, that's definitely the truth. That's real talk right there. So this is why this panel is so important today. So with that, let's meet these beautiful and phenomenal women of color. Maija.
Hi, Zoomies, and happy International Women's Day. I'm Maija, and I am an internal communications manager here at Zoom, and I've been here for a little bit over a year, and I'm so excited. So excited to be here today.
Tina.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tina Kim. I am the manager of our customer success programs team, and I have the privilege to be here at Zoom for about 4.5 years, and I am so excited to be part of this amazing panel group.
Ro.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rosa Linda. I'm with the Healthcare SMB VAST team. I'm a team lead, and I also co-lead Somos Zoom. I've been here for 3 years.
Neha.
Hi, everyone. My name is Neha. And so I currently am the talent pipelining specialist for APAC. And I've been here about 1.5 years. I also help lead the Happy Crew team for India.
Haley.
Hi, everyone. I am Haley. I'm part of the talent team here at Zoom and work as a recruiter day to day. I'm also Nicole's co-lead for Zoom Soul and have been with Zoom for about 2 years now. Very excited to be here today.
Wei.
Hi, everyone. This is Wei, and I'm head of Zoom events and a webinar. I've been with Zoom for about 2 years. Yesterday, I've heard a few happy IWD, so I know that International Women's Day is getting more popular. Hey, way to go, Zoomy Women's.
And last but certainly not least, Annabelle.
Hi, everyone. My name is Annabelle, and I'm an account executive for state and local government. I'm also co-lead of Somos with Rosalinda, and I've been with Zoom for 3 years, and I'm excited to be here and amongst all these wonderful ladies.
This is awesome. So I just want to take this moment in. So to see all of us together, it's a beautiful rainbow right here. So thank you all for joining. So let's get this started with Ro. What was the journey like navigating your career in the tech industry as a woman of color?
I would say that it was a little bit confusing. Honestly, I didn't grow up knowing anybody who had been in tech, knowing anybody who had any idea how to negotiate pay in tech, how to, figure out the role that would be the best fit for me. So it was a lot of me doing my own research, looking at different news sources like Forbes and Entrepreneur Magazine and places like that to really learn what I should be doing. Like I said, I don't have anybody in my family who has worked in tech. Anybody that I've grown up with, they all have blue collar jobs. So even just having a professional job, let alone a job in tech, was something that I kind of navigated on my own.
Love hearing that. Love hearing that. Wei, what's it been like for you navigating this journey, your career in tech so far?
I would say that it has been on the high level, at a high level, it has been okay. However, every day we fought against a lot of small things. I would say, I know people are saying that race discrimination and gender discrimination, but we don't really feel it. A very, I should say that very obviously, but however, we do sense the typical, I think there's a term for it, the micro versus macro aggression, and I feel that every day. And sometimes I feel like these could be even coming from our own women, not just a different gender. And I often see that if we can raise that awareness and also focus on the core value and core competency, eventually we will be overcome all this unfortunate. And I think it's important for us to get together and talk about it and raise awareness, because I sometimes often even check myself. While on one hand that we might be the victims of it, and sometimes we actually very subconsciously, we may actually get into that situation without even knowing it subconsciously.
Yeah, and we have to give you big kudos too, because of everybody on the panel, you are head of. So not a lot of us who are head of something. So big big kudos for you.
Honored to be here.
So, and we love that. Thank you for representing. Maija, lastly for you, what's been your journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, I would have to piggyback off of Ro. I think coming from, a family who's never worked in tech, who had those ceilings, right? Those limited, glass ceilings. So this didn't seem possible for me kind of growing up. But I think one thing I love about tech is just being able to work in an environment that uses technology to advance the lives of people, right? To make people's lives better. So I think that's the best thing about, I would say working in tech, but, it's been tough, as a woman of color, as a Black woman specifically. And I think it goes back to, some of the statistics that you mentioned in the beginning. I love working in tech, but there's a lot of times where, I look to the left and right and I'm the only one who looks like me, in this space, and then you mentioned like leadership, right? 29% of women being board members, but only 6% of that are Black women. That's less than half. So I think that, being a woman of color, being a Black woman in tech, sometimes you kind of feel the repercussions of feeling undervalued. We feel undervalued. We feel like, at times we don't matter, our voices don't matter. And so I think that's the tough part. But I think kind of always going back to just remembering your why, and the mission of why I'm here has kind of carried me through.
Yeah, that's key, the why. Tina, has your experience at Zoom helped you grow in your career in tech?
I would definitely have to say, yes, it has. My tech journey actually started probably 6 years ago, and I was actually in retail banking, managing branches for almost 14 years prior. And so that's an archaic industry. And so I felt the micro and macro aggressions very noticeably in that industry. So when I came into tech, I joined Salesforce, which is DI was very present and abundant at that time, but still early. And coming to Zoom, I think that the culture that we had allowed me to still have some openness, but it's not saying it was perfect. I still have microaggressions that I've experienced throughout my journey here at Zoom from internal and external parties. And so nothing's perfect, but I will say that the environment and the culture does make a difference, because I honestly don't know if I would be sitting on this panel with the courage and to be open about my voice. And so I do attribute that to the overarching culture that Zoom has allowed me, but it's also the space that I've decided to claim myself. So.
I love that. Neha, could you talk a little bit about your experience at Zoom? How's it helped your career grow?
So I have close to about 4 years of experience in total, and 1.5 is here at Zoom. I think at the time I was exposed to ERGs was in LinkedIn. And then obviously when I joined Zoom, we are big on culture. So Zoom is about growth and enhancement of skills. And there are not many organizations that, promote growth, promote culture, etc. And I'm lucky enough to be able to, be a part of this company. I started off as a recruitment coordinator, and now, I got a chance to advance up to being a sourcer, and be a part of a Happy Crew, be a part of the ERGs, and collaborate with them. And there's a very strong support system and mentorship that I see within the company, and I feel like this can take anyone to different heights. But at the same time, like Tina said, right, claiming a spot, I feel like that is also important, because you would have to put yourself out there, and grab any opportunity that you can, and that would help you grow a lot as well.
And Annabelle, same question for you. How's your experience at Zoom helped you grow your career?
Yeah, Zoom was my first tech job, and I started as an online account executive, which it's like the starter role into tech. And I moved my way all the way up to state and local account executive, where, I'm one of two that, have come from that same route. And I'm, going against people who've had 10 to 20 years of experience. So that to me has been a huge win. I, had a different journey. I started with the LATAM team. So to me, I am from Georgia, so there isn't much representation, as you read those numbers, and Latinas and really any segment. Graduation rates are still really low, graduation from college. So for me, I was the only Latina in many jobs. So when I started Zoom, I was in a LATAM team. And just the difference that made, my self-esteem, the way that I would come to work, my coworkers and colleagues spoke Spanish. They understood, what we love, our music. So to me, I think starting in that culture and starting in just such a huge support system, and as I've moved my way up, just still having them, has been such a big part of it. So to me, I've had a great success at Zoom, and especially I think for me, it's like just leading with care. And I think Zoom's, delivering happiness is something I've just really focused on, no matter what's going on around me.
That's awesome. Thanks, Annabelle. Haley, the importance of allyship as it pertains to women of color in tech. How do you support other women of color in tech?
I think that a lot of my experience has been in providing safety for other women of color to come to me and ask questions or feel like a sounding board, just because I know that that's been so helpful for me throughout my journey. Similar to Maija and to Ro, coming into the tech industry was like a whole new ballpark. It's like having a first generation student going to college and you're filling out your FAFSA for the first, like I had no idea what RSUs were. I had no idea about a lot of these things. And so even as my career progresses forward and I am, considering potentially trying new projects or asking, for advancements or opportunities, I know that I can go to Nicole or I can go to Maija or Ro, and so many Zoomies, especially, on this panel, I think in particular, have been incredible bastions of just support and of allyship. I think is the best, is to your point, the best way to kind of put it. I think just, building trust and having genuine friendships. I feel like whether it's intentionally sort of curated or it happens naturally, I feel like we all tend to find our way to one another. And I think that it creates a really special bond that is mutually beneficial and that hopefully, carries beyond sort of our tenures at any one particular company.
Yeah, the sisterhood is strong. And like you said, it's one of those things we all kind of fall into, because having those conversations or just trying to figure out different things. I mean, how many times we've gone to Ronnie when it comes to the negotiation conversation. So,
Exactly.
We'll be going to Ronnie for more of that too another time. Rose, same question for you as far as how do you support other women of color in tech?
Yeah, so I'm kind of the same way. I try to be as open and inclusive to basically anybody to talk to me if they'd like to. I want to be somebody that they're not going to feel intimidated by or they don't want to approach. So I try to be as approachable as possible because that's when you're able to form those relationships and be able to open up. Another way is my therapist actually just introduced me to somebody in the Denver community who is a part of a few different organizations. And so I've decided that I want to get more involved because my life kind of changed overnight being here at Zoom. And so I want to be able to give back to people who are exploring careers in tech or want to network with somebody who has a job in tech. And so I'm trying to just, give back to my community. And like Manny Medina said in our webinar previously during Hispanic Heritage Month is take that elevator down and meet them where they're at and kind of, be that person who can represent what they want to achieve.
I love it. I love it. Tina, same question for you.
Yeah, I think that I have a lot of mixed feelings about this and all in the positive ways. I think that allyship and supporting each other is so instrumental, but like I think we need to also be allies for ourselves. I think that's one of the things that I've recognized myself is, I think Wei, you brought it in, like you brought it up that sometimes like even us women wanting to support other women, we don't necessarily know where that person's coming from. And I know as ironic as it is to say, even though you think that somebody may need help, they may not be ready to receive it. And like sometimes like there have been points where I've received mentorship or allyship, or I know somebody wants to take me under their wings, but I'm actually questioning myself if I even deserve that opportunity. And so I think it's a lot of like, we need to empathize with other people more and understand more. And the allyship is good, but also understand the backgrounds of others. And Ro, I'm the first, sorry, dropping the tears. That's why I got my tissue box. But I think that again, it's like the empathy of just understanding what that person's coming for. And I think that like the allyship that we need to work on is first work on yourself, be ready to receive it before you can even give it, right? And know that you're deserving of it. But I know that many people struggle with knowing that they're enough or that they do deserve some. So I definitely say that I have personally benefited from allyship, but I've also been in situations where I felt uncomfortable and undeserving, which didn't make it actually productive for either party. And so I think addressing that and also having open, comfortable and uncomfortable conversations about allyship and when it works and when it doesn't is also very important, so that at least we know what boundaries that we're working with, because each individual, as many women of color, as many different backgrounds that we have, nobody's cookie cutter. Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, no, you said it all with that, Tina, because I think a lot of people don't realize too, and just, just from reading and knowing other women, more women of color suffer from imposter syndrome. So just when you talked about that whole deserving it, I think that is something we need to talk more about. So thank you for that. Annabelle, what do you think is the biggest gap or challenge that women of color are facing today in the tech space?
Well, I would say representation. And like you said, I just think not enough leaders. Currently we had our head of state and local government is a woman of color. And just to see that representation to me as an employee was huge, because, it gives me hope. And I'm like, not only in Zoom, but she comes from, Cisco prior to Zoom, just to see, women representing each other. I think that's really, to me, especially in leadership, especially in the C-level and women of color specifically. So I would say that representation in general is where we have a huge gap.
Maija, where do you see the biggest gap or challenge?
Yeah, I know you alluded to only one, but I'll give three here. I think the first is kind of what Annabelle said, is representation. There's not enough of us, especially when we look at leadership tables and things like that. Like there's just not enough of us. So I would say that's the first thing. The second thing is, I guess this is a part two to the first one, but there's not enough of us at leadership tables. Like we need to be in those spaces that help to influence decisions that impact us, that impact women of color. So we have folks who are in positions of power, who are in leadership positions that are making decisions for women of color that are not women of color. So I think we need more influence, more seats at the leadership table. Yeah. And then thirdly, I think is having a voice and other people valuing our voice. I think that we are undervalued, like I talked about in the beginning, in the tech space. And I don't think other people understand how important it is for us to have a voice in these spaces. So I think just the idea that our voice is undervalued in tech is a huge, huge challenge.
Wei, I wanted you to wrap this question up. What do you find is the biggest challenge or gap?
Sure. I think everyone has said a lot of good different ways of the challenges. Perhaps I can talk about a bit something that I felt quite personally. So throughout the last 20 years, I've been mentoring a lot of college girl students and also young women who just entered the STEM field and also the high-tech profession. I would say that, first of all, there are a lot of obstacles throughout the journey. So I can start with the funnel, the entry point to STEM in schools and hiring, and stay with the STEM field. So when I started mentoring these girl students, I felt actually the percentage of those girl students in the STEM field is not small, not too small. Yeah. Now, however, as the career has progressed, eventually many of them just quit in the middle. So one of the things, and this is quite, I know it's probably not unique to tech. One of the things is just in general, childbearing and raising is a huge challenge for professional women. And we just need to get so much support from workplace, from childcare system in the community and the family members. And I myself, I could even share with you that I have 2 children. And when my kids were under 5 years old, there were many times I have thought to myself, I quit this job. I couldn't keep up both the high demand from the job as well as the kind of care that my kids would need. So I would say that in general, this is just one of the huge challenges for kids, for women to stay in a good profession and also high tech industry. And the second thing I would say, and I also personally experienced quite a bit, and that is, I think we earlier anecdotally, we talked about the microaggression. Because it's not a macro aggression, and actually it happens very subtly and almost you're facing it every day. And we women, and I would say that a lot of time we care about how we're being perceived, right? So I feel every day, oftentimes we receive that, and women seem to get more belittled. They just get belittled much more often at workplace, and oftentimes either for managers or other senior leaders. And I shared earlier, I didn't directly feel the like so-called huge gender discrimination or anything, but I do feel like it's very subtle that every day we seem to be getting some of those belittlement and be treated that we're less at workplace. So for me, these are the 2 main challenges. And then I have observed from the girl students or women professionals I have mentored.
So I want to bring this up now. I was going to bring it up later, but I think we've talked about it enough as far as micro and macroaggressions. And people might be thinking, what is that? So a microaggression is like a verbal or nonverbal slight, snub, or insult. A macroaggression is an act of racism towards everyone of a race, gender, or a group. So some examples of both would be, you speak English very well. Where are you from? Or where were you born? Knowing you were born and raised here. When I look at you, I don't see color. Okay, I know we heard that one. Or I'm not racist, I have several Black friends. So those are just some examples, but I'd love to hear kind of from everybody, because I know personally from talking to you all, you've heard this, whether it's here at work or outside of work, but Wei, you had talked about it from the beginning. If you wouldn't mind sharing some things that you've experienced as far as micro or macroaggressions.
And Nicole, what you have said earlier, I have experienced them all.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, and one of the things that I have experienced is more often, oh, you're the only woman in this whole meeting room or this whole boardroom. I hear that every single day.
Yeah.
Every single day. Oh, really? You have 2 kids and you can be at the level you're at? And this kind of comment, honestly, I've observed only comes to women, and no one said that to our men senior leaders So yeah, lots of stuff like that. I always feel like the micro is much harder than macro, because macro everyone can point out, oh, you are having blah blah blah, the discrimination. But micro is something, it's like you hear it, but you feel like it doesn't feel right. But then you ponder on it, people have already moved it on.
Right.
It is that. It is that.
Yeah, I've done that. I call that part of my looking into the office camera. Somebody will say something and you're like, did they just say that kind of thing? So Maija, we just recently were talking about that. I want you to share some of the things that you get.
Oh my gosh, I could take over this entire webinar talking about microaggressions, but if you have ever worked with me, you know I love my long nails. So I get comments about that all the time. How do you work with those long nails? How do you text? How do you type? How do you function with your long nails? At a previous workplace, I had a guy tell me that my hair reminds him of his dog. And that was when we were in the workplace. So it wasn't even a virtual thing. We were in the workplace face to face. He told me that. And then I would say just questions about my hair too, you know, all the time. Like, how do you get it like that? How often do you do your hair? How do you get it to stay like that? Are those curls? Like, I mean, all types of things.
Yeah. Yeah. The hair one, and then you speak so well. So Haley, I see a lot of head nods.
Yeah, mine are typically also related to my hair. Is it real? Is that all your hair? And then a lot of times I do I am biracial. So a lot of times I'll get questions of like, what are you? Where are you from? You know, and I speak so well. I don't speak like a black girl. Like a lot of that I just think is incredibly offensive. And, you know, it is really shocking that a lot of that does happen in the workplace. Like why is that ever something that ever has to come up? It just always baffles me. And there have been times where I've sort of pushed back and I've been like, what do you mean by that? What does that mean? What does it mean to talk like a black girl? Like what? And then they kind of sink inside themselves. And it's like, you know, this is a ridiculous question you're asking me. Like, why would you ever? So, I will say it hasn't happened as often at Zoom, if at all, but yeah, definitely at previous companies, it's been really jarring to have to answer those kinds of questions.
Neha, I saw the head bobbing and you were like, yep. So what have you gotten?
Well, the same thing about being able to talk English, like, you know, I think people typically, you know, stereotype saying that, oh, you know, an Indian woman would have an accent. But like I've been brought up at home, we speak English. And I've been brought up in an environment where English is like, you know, kind of like my first language. So it kind of surprises people when I'm able to talk English and not have an accent or have a little bit of an accent. So yeah, that is something that I've come across a lot.
Annabelle, we've had these conversations.
Yeah, well, I would say, you know, my last name, Guevara, a lot of people either, you know, don't ask or they're like, what is that? Or how do you say it? And I made a point, I did get married 2 years ago to keep it because I worked hard for this Latino representation, and my name in itself, you know, it's my brand. And yes, I do sometimes worry when I'm emailing people and when I'm meeting with my customers, because yeah, it's not a common last name, especially in the Latino. But I would say that's a huge microaggression. It's, you know, and I'm so conscious of that even now, because it's when I speak to people, I sometimes, you know, how do you pronounce it? I think that's fine to ask people how do you pronounce their name rather than just assuming or making them feel uncomfortable. So I will start with I mean, but everything all the ladies say. I think another thing I've seen mostly in women is, you know, if like they push back or the way they talk, or, you know, if they're in a meeting, whereas if it was a male, I just don't see the same, you know, like room vibe. If it was a male, you know, pushing back or, you know, saying their thoughts. So, and that I would say I've seen that with, you know, non-colored women also, like where they're the ones speaking up and people just kind of look at them sideways. But I have a feeling if it was a male, it would have been completely different.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talked about the name, because that's something, you know, if you have somebody with a different name, I think people, they don't ask. They just come out and just, you know, oh, Maija, it's like they're not asking. Or they automatically want to give me a nickname. You know, can I call you Nikki? No, not at work. Okay, it's family and friends. I don't know you like that. So, or like Way. The first time we met, I asked you, how do you pronounce your name? Which, because I'm in a meeting and everybody's like, we, and I'm like, do we even know how, you know what I mean? Tina, can we talk a little bit about what you get, or as far as micro or macroaggressions?
I am apparently full of microaggressions that I've received. Wait, I want to go back to one of the things that you called out, being dismissed for your talents or skills and not being accounted for. I think being judged on, especially working in video conference, we're video first, right?
Mhm.
And, you know, I mentioned I was in banking. I can't hide that because that was in person, but being video first, I realized I can't, there's no way that I can mask myself behind a voice. Even going back to voices, I remember I worked with a partner of mine that I hadn't known, we'd never seen each other. Apparently social media stalking wasn't a thing back then. And when I met her in person, she straight up told me and said, "Hey, I thought you had blonde hair and blue eyes." And I was like, "Oh," after 2 years, and we bonded really well. And I was like, "Well, you're welcome, because now you have met a Korean that sounds like this." And but when she said it, it really took a step back, because she made these like assumptions based on how I spoke, and I was born in Korea and I immigrated here quite young, but I'm still conversationally fluent. And so I took a lot of pride in making sure that like my language is something that I wanted to try to maintain as much as possible. But for that kind of general assumption, like you didn't want to just assume that I was like some cool ass chick that you wanted to go ahead and eventually meet. Like it was like that was your first impression. And then also the concept of being dismissed based on like how I look. Like people are like, "Oh yeah, of course, like that customer is gonna love you." And I was like, "Great," because of my skill set. But like you just kind of feel that like micro tone, especially when it comes from men. It's like you may think that it's coming out of a positive intent or that there's some kind of complimentary component, but you know what? Beyond how I look, I take pride in how well I do my job, right? And I think that a lot of times that I get obviously judged based on my looks. And you know, I throughout my journey have said, you know what, I'm not going to let that waver me, because I'm going to go ahead and show them through grit and determination that the results are there. But you know what, I like, my biggest fucking pet peeve is honestly when we're in a big meeting and sometimes there's a call to action and you may be the single woman or a single woman of color, because even with the color, there's unfortunately there's a hierarchy, right? And so sometimes like when there's a call to action, I'm like, that's not my job, but why do I feel like everybody's looking at me because I should be the one to follow up or schedule and coordinate or
The
do
note
these like,
taker.
yeah, and there's nothing wrong with doing that, and I get that. But the point is, if you're assuming it because it's you think of it because it's not my role, though, like that's a whole nother play. Like it's almost like, am I likely to concede? Well, why do you think that I'm going to concede and take that role if it's not my call to action? And I think there's a lot of assumptions based on that. And you know, I think that we also can take claim to silence, right? Like not only just saying, like, you know, Haley, you mentioned about like saying, well, what do you mean by that? Making them speak to it. But sometimes when somebody wants to say, well, so and so should be doing this or we should be doing this, I just sit silent now. I'm like, well, I didn't take claim to it, so you guys figure it out. And if you guys need help, I can give you guidance, but I'm no longer going to be that person that fills the void or is like the go-to person just by de facto because you think that I'm supposed to do it, right?
Yeah, no, that I think that's, especially if you're in those meetings and the only woman, automatically they want to make you the mother of the meeting, and it's like, no, that's not my role. So, Ro, everybody got to share. I wanted you to come in because, like, I know you've gone to that and you've heard some interesting things as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, in my personal life, I had people who get a little too comfortable making racial jokes towards me. In my dating life, I am the spicy Latina and get over sexualized. In the professional setting, I've had people who are surprised that Spanish was my first language because I don't have an accent. Or I go by Ro because I don't want people calling me Rosa or Rose because that's not my name. And it's honestly like a preemptive approach to making sure that they don't call me something I don't want to go by. So those are, you know, a lot of things that I've gone through. I've also, when I first started at Zoom, a lot of people assumed I was on the Latium team. And I mean, that's not a slight against the Latium team because I love them and they're amazing and they're able to explain and sell Zoom in multiple languages, which is fantastic. But why is it assumed that I would be on the Latium team?
Mm.
You know, there's no reason to believe that I am automatically on the LATAM team just because my name is Rosalinda Torres.
Right.
And so for me, that was the biggest eye opener. And then I realized for the longest time, the team that I was on, the segment I was in, I was the only Latina out of everybody. So it wasn't that I'm giving them a pass and saying it was a fair assumption, but what would give them reason to think otherwise?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about why do we need more women of color in tech? Neha, why do we need more women of color in tech?
I feel like this point has come about a lot. Like, even if I'm just talking about numbers, we're talking about, like, the number of women who are in tech in India is just 35%. And if you're looking globally, it's 24 to 29 who are in a decision-making role, right? I mean, like, it's nowhere close to, us being able to attend the gender equality over there. Even being in my role as a sourcer, when I'm sourcing for a particular kind of roles, and if they are leadership roles, or even if they are team lead kind of roles, I don't see a lot of women who are in leadership roles. The pool is very less compared to the number of men in those roles. So I think it's very important to create awareness, and here I think is where the sponsorship and allyship also comes in, where these women, they might be like, like we know, we like to stand up for ourselves. There might be a lot of women who would want to stand up for themselves, reach different positions, and be at a leadership position one way or another. But there might be a lot of hurdles on the way. And I feel like, being able to act as a sponsor to these women could give them a, boost, or put them on the map, so that we see more of those numbers of women like in leadership roles. And would be able to hire them in our companies as well, right?
Thank you. Maija, why do we need more women of color in tech?
Yeah, Nicole, that's a great question. And let me say, I am not a conspiracy theorist in any way, but the idea that we even have to have these types of conversations, right? Like that we even have to have a diversity, equity, and inclusion team, right? Like diversity is simply just embracing our differences, embracing our unique traits, our skills, our talents, and what we bring to the table. And the reason why we have to have these conversations, and the reason why we have to have those teams that are dedicated to that mission, is because people don't embrace our differences and our unique traits and our skills and all those, and our talents and all those good things. But I would say that, we need more women of color in tech just for that, because of what we bring to the table. And when you think of diversity, diversity breeds innovation, diversity breeds change, diversity breeds talent, diversity breeds solution, diversity breeds money. So
Yeah.
I think, it's so important that, we recognize that each one of us, has something different to bring to the table. And that's what creates, an amazing, innovation or solution or technology or what have you. So that's why we need more women of color in tech, because of what we bring to the table.
All of you just touched on something. What you just said, I think the common thing I'm hearing from all of us too is that creating that space. We obviously need to create a path for other people to follow us. And I know for me, that's so important, creating that path, going to not only colleges or like middle school, elementary, but just the women that are in the company. I don't see a lot of myself as far as in management, and I'm in a lot of those meetings where it's just me. So wanting to create that path to make it easier for other people. I'm so big on creating spaces, especially women of color, where we're celebrated and not tolerated. That is huge for me. And I think that is why truly we need women of color in tech. So it's been talked a lot about these days. And I know this is something that I have mentioned a long time ago. Minda Harts, who was recently a special guest author, she had talked about it. She talked about sponsorship and needing more of that. And that's something kind of a theme that we're all talking about too. So Haley, why is sponsorship so important, especially for women of color?
I think it kind of leans back into that idea of having somewhat of a shared experience, right? I'm more likely to trust someone who has had a shared experience that I've had, who can relate to some of the challenges that I may see, and who can advocate for my journey through those. It's not to say that I couldn't have that experience with someone who isn't a woman of color, but I think it does sort of lend to it just lends to having someone that you trust and someone that you know can advocate for you, having understood where you are hoping to go, and who may have a relational experience. And vice versa. You know, if I were to be an ally for someone and to be a sponsor for someone, you know, there's an element of relationship that is not necessarily something that everyone can relate to. So for me, that's why it's most important. Trust is sort of paramount for me. And when I think about the people that I can trust most, it's usually people that I feel like I can relate to on a lot of different things.
So Annabelle, same question for you. Why do we need more women of color in tech?
Everything Haley said, I would say, even me personally, when I was choosing a therapist, I chose a woman of color, specifically a Black woman, because I'm like, I have something to learn from this woman. Y'all are powerful beings. Y'all been through a lot. And I want to know how you overcame all of that. So to me is, again, diversity. Like, I think that just having someone, you know, that went through, not every, you know, I'm not saying all women of color go through a hard time, but most of women of color have probably clawed their way where they're at. So it's like seeing their strength and how they overcame that. I just think it's so important because, yeah, like you said, you just bring different perspective. And I feel like, you know, don't give up easily. We have to wake up and try again. Another, you know, thing I want to mention is, you know, mental health is something that, especially in the Latino community, is not spoken about. So where our parents were like, I wasn't depressed, I didn't have anxiety, you just need to wake up and do it and go to work and be quiet and just make that money. Yeah. Also, the thought that you have so hard to make money, it was another thought. So all of that, I think, gets in our brain, and we you know, have to think of all this stuff like, oh, I need to work really hard. And you see people that don't work as hard and they get where they're at. So it's like, why can we not, you know, believe that in ourselves? So again, what Tina said, it's like that imposter syndrome is like, you even kind of feel guilty for being successful as a woman of color because you don't have that representation or that sponsorship. I also want to note that I, similar to Rosalinda, don't have anyone, and I'm the first to graduate of my siblings and my family. So I had to figure it all on my own. So having people that have gone through it is just so important. So again, supporting each other and lifting each other up.
Wei, why are conversations like this in the workplace so important? You know, I look at, we've reached at one point like 94 people are watching us right now. Obviously we have 6,000 plus. And, you know, I think whenever we have these conversations, we always struggle when the numbers are low. It'd be nice if we could have a higher turnout, because quite honestly, some of the people who need to hear this conversation aren't here, or some of the people who could actually make a difference when it comes to hiring and recruiting aren't here. And I've heard it, even if people don't think I've heard it, as far as like, you know, it's kind of like telling those basketball players to shut up and dribble. Like, I just want to work. I don't want to have these outside conversations. I just want to work. But these conversations are so important. So why are these conversations like what we're doing today so important in the workplace?
Yeah, Nicole. So first of all, I hope the audience who came to this webinar, not just limited to our fellow women. I hope that there are actually men audience as well, and from all different functions as well as different levels. So I feel bringing up the visibility of the challenges that we all had to just talk about, and also raising the awareness would have helped the people practice. So for example, earlier I mentioned that certain things you don't, even sometimes we ourselves, we have certain bias towards ourselves as well. So talking about it and also raising awareness makes us think at a daily basis. Oh, did I just say something that is actually not that appropriate to a certain group of people? Yeah. So I think that talking about it, and honestly, this is the first time I'm on all kind of different panelists talking different topics, but this is almost like a first time outside of my community work that I come to talk about IWD. Yeah. So I do, when I came here, I was thinking, okay, what would be some of the topics that we'll be talking about here? Then I actually searched around. I actually see that nowadays what people are really celebrating for IW. So I educated myself, and throughout the listening to that few, almost more than half an hour of the conversation and also speeches given by different women leaders or men leaders, I realized, oh, there are some things that I didn't realize I actually did it wrong. So I think raising the awareness and also visibility for sure would help people everyday practice.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Tina, why are these conversations so important?
I have a couple of thoughts. One is normalization. We need to normalize this. This shouldn't be like a International Women's Month reason to have these talks. We should have these day to day and be comfortable. There are a lot of microaggressions that have been normalized that we are trying to course correct now. Why can't we go ahead and normalize this? And so that's why I appreciate being part of the session, but even on a smaller scale, we should just be open to providing feedback. And that's kind of been my journey throughout Zoom, is that like, if people don't know, because microaggressions, assuming that people are unintentionally doing it, I have to lead with the fact that they had not necessarily positive intent, but they didn't know better. So let me go ahead and help them educate. And so if we continue to have this dialogue, we're continuing to educate, we're normalizing the topic, we're making the uncomfortable more comfortable to talk about, then we can also pinpoint the disparities more apparently and as a collective group and build additional allyship. And the second part that I'm really most passionate about is the next generation. If we don't normalize this now, our next generation, I've got a daughter and I also have a son, and they're both under the age of 10, but I am trying to go ahead and build their courage so that hopefully they're not having these panel sessions. It's just normal talk, right? Because everybody is hopefully, and by the time that they're in the working space, that the economy and the businesses have changed. I do know that also Zoom is unique. And so we'll have to go ahead and figure out how we can boil the rest of the ocean. But like, let's start at home. Let's make this the regular, and let's be comfortable talking about the uncomfortable, because it really isn't uncomfortable if you just know what you're working with, right?
Yeah, I love that. Be the solution, not a problem, not the problem. So the last question for everyone: what does being on this panel mean to you? And then any last words you'd like to leave the audience. So Annabelle, I'm gonna have you start that.
This panel means to me that I feel like we're moving to the right direction. Like Tina said, like normalizing these conversations are really important. So to me, it means a representation and moving forward, and just bringing, like, again, diverse backgrounds and our thoughts. And what was the second question? Sorry.
It's just, you know, any last words you wanted to leave?
Okay. Yeah, I think for our audience, and as you know, Wei mentioned, like hopefully there are males here. Know that you're allies. Like, it's not us against, you know, men or us against anyone. It's really us together. So I would say making sure that you're listening to the women in your life, especially today. Like, tell the women in your life, because they make it possible for men to be successful. So it's like, make sure that you are taking that moment. To me, I have women all around me. I have all sisters. So women and feminine energies everywhere. So I make sure that I, you know, let them know how valuable they are to this world. So I would say, like, take a moment today to just tell your moms and your grandmas and your aunties, like, how much wonderful things that they've done to you in your life. And obviously your colleagues and your leaders or your managers that are women, because as we mentioned, like, you know, this is our professional life, but we all know, especially at Zoom, 2020 happened and mix all together. So as much as this is our professional setting, we're also humans, and empathy goes a big way. So just make sure you're being kind to each other, and, you know, telling women how awesome they are.
Well, Annabelle, honestly, I think you said that all for everyone. I personally want to thank you all. I reached out to each one of you and asked you, and everybody just said yes. There was no thinking about it. There was no, I don't have time. So personally, thank you for this. This is something that Christy and I, who I'll be introducing in a little bit, had thought about doing even before the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit and everybody was heads down, and we all know how that went. So thank you to have this, and we want to continue this conversation, and we will. Again, we're going to do this again. Next time we're going to break out in breakout rooms. So I would just like to leave with this. I wear this shirt, representation matters, because it does, but not only representation, but being intentional with hiring matters, sponsorship matters. And I'm big on, if we can't get a seat at the table, then we'll just take the table. I think we're at that point. So forget about the seat, we'll just take the whole table. So with that, I'd like to introduce the head of Women at Zoom, And Chrissy, if you come in with any parting words before we leave.
Oh my goodness. I just wanted to want to thank you to this amazing panel for being here. Thank you, Nicole, for being such an amazing leader to bring this together. And I am blown away by the power of each and every one of your words today. And I love that, you know, to this point, let us normalize these conversations so that they don't have to be a panel, but we do obviously have work to do and it starts at home. But being that we are at Zoom, we have the ability to not only change this internally for our personal experiences on the day-to-day, but also how this impacts the greater world. So with that, I would love to invite everyone here that is joining in today, listening in today. If you're watching the recording, join us on Women at Zoom on chat. We will be tackling all the topics. Nothing is on or off the table. Nicole, I love it. Let's go grab that table. But also, it is open to everyone. So we are open to women, allies. You are welcome here. We do have, as part of that, one of the initiatives that we've been running are called This Human Thing sessions. So these are spaces that are open to everyone, part of the Women at Zoom chat channel and community, where we have supportive, inclusive spaces. And being a good human is kind of the only requirement here, but where we can safely discuss and tackle the uncomfortable conversations to help have these conversations not be so incredibly uncomfortable for those where it is uncomfortable. And we wouldn't be here if it wasn't the truth of the matter that these conversations can be. So with that, come join us at Women at Zoom. I'd also like to highlight, we have an amazing group of employee resource groups available. So do want to give a shout out to all of our employee resource groups that you can also join in as well. It takes each and every one of us to make a big difference each day. And I always believe this. I know Eric talks about it all the time, but every day sit and take a few moments to reflect on how we can be better each day. And hearing from this incredibly powerful women panel today, I hope that you take this feedback. I hope that you bring it to your teams, for those attending, for those listening in. I hope this helps start some conversations. And then with that also, let us connect with our global Zoom community. So reach out to a colleague, have a conversation, and let this also help spur some conversations that perhaps wouldn't have otherwise, so that as we can make the world a brighter place, and it starts with us here. So thank you all, and thank you again to this amazing panel today.
Thank you, everybody.